Leonora Carrington was born in 1917 and lived until 2011. Her output was extensive, and during her long life she explored many different themes and styles in her paintings. In order to cover these various facets and periods, this study course will consist of a number of sections: the early years, Mexico, Celtic, magical, her map diagram, her humour, and later pieces. We will, for the most part, pass over her biography, which has been exhaustively dealt with elsewhere, except for some aspects which are directly relevant to a painting, and instead focus entirely on her work. She began painting and writing stories in her childhood. Among her earliest adult works is the 1933 Sisters of the Moon Fantasia, created when she was 16 at a boarding school in Florence. These show her fascination, even at an early age, for magic and witchcraft. The Wraith is from 2 years later. Also, in 1937, at age 20, she made a painting of a horse with a long mane. The setting with chairs and drapery suggests an interior. She reworked this in oils in 1939. In 1937, she met Max Ernst and became immediately attached to him, and they eloped to France. In 1938, she made a double portrait of herself and Max. She is shown with a horse, while Ernst is shown as a strutting blue cockerel. At this time, Carrington saw herself as a horse figure, while Ernst identified himself with his lop-lop bird avatar. In her self-portrait of 1938, also titled The Inn of the Dawn Horse, she depicts herself seated in a room. Through a window framed with curtains, we see a horse running free. Behind her is a wooden rocking horse in the same galloping posture. Carrington seems to be engaged in conversation with a female hyena. Her short story, The Debutante, written in 1938, perhaps explains her use of this image in the painting. When I was a debutante, I often went to the zoo. I went so often that I knew the animals better than I knew the girls of my own age. The animal I got to know best was a young hyena. She knew me too. She was very intelligent. I taught her French, and she, in return, taught me her language. In this way we passed many pleasant hours. To the right of the hyena there is a smudged area, which appears to be an erasure where she has painted over some previous image. If we increase the contrast, it appears to be a little man with a conical hat, perhaps a statue. One clearly sees the shadow of the form on the floor. In the same year, 1938, she created the painting The Meal of Lord Candlestick. Lord Candlestick was the nickname she gave to her father, a wealthy industrialist. They lived in Crookhay Hall within a large estate. Here she presents a satire of a banquet in the hall. We see 5 women seated at a table set with this banquet. The woman at the head of the table sticks a fork into a baby boy as if to carve the carcass. This image is likely to be her rejection of her Catholic upbringing by picturing the cannibalism which one could read into the Catholic Eucharist, the carving up and eating of the body of Christ. Some commentators also suggest this is an allusion to Jonathan Swift's satire, A Modest Proposal, but suggested that the children of the poor Irish should be eaten by the wealthy aristocrats to solve the poverty and economic problems of the time. Carrington was apparently reading Swift at the time of creating this painting. Clearly, one thing she took delight in while living with her parents was horse riding. She gives this form in her painting of 1939, The Horses of Lord Candlestick. That same year, 1939, she created one of her major paintings, the portrait of Max Ernst, also entitled The Bird Superior Max Ernst. He is shown in a glacial Arctic wasteland, clothed in a warm, feathered robe with a fish-like tail. This might be related to the figure of Celestine in her short story Pigeon Fly, written about the same time, where he is described as wearing a gown of feathers and striped stockings. In the painting, Ernst holds a lamp to show the way ahead, but instead of a candle flame, we see a little prancing horse. In the background is a white horse, now frozen and inert. At this time in her life, Leonora identified herself with the horse. The two images are clearly related within the painting. The frozen inert horse becomes a living horse in Ernst's lamp. When painting this image, she was perhaps picturing herself not merely as a part of Max Ernst's life, but a guiding influence, released from the inertia of her former life. For Leonora, the image of a horse seems to have suggested freedom of spirit. She even wrote a short story, The Bird Superior Max Ernst, published in 1942, in which Ernst and Carrington are initially within some alchemical fire, but then Ernst transforms into a bird and Carrington into a horse so they can escape the flames. Ernst and Carrington apparently collaborated in the painting The Encounter of 1939. Here, in a volcanic landscape, two female figures encounter a strange demonic woman. The figures on the left were created by Carrington, while Ernst provided the landscape and the demon-like figures. In the left group, one of the figures is depicted as a horse-headed woman, possibly Carrington herself. On the right is a more menacing Gorgon-like woman, accompanied by a bat-winged, almost demonic form. The meeting of these two groups is surely rather unsettling. The two on the left seem threatened by their encounter with the demonic woman on the right. During 1941, while still in France, but in difficult circumstances due to the war, Leonora worked on some drawings. These seem to continue her criticism of her Catholic upbringing. Untitled of 1941 shows a monstrous nun-like figure bearing a cross in her right hand and an inverted demon in her left. Do You Know My Aunt Eliza appears to depict a demonic priest or monk holding a crucifix. She had to escape from France and relocated in Spain, only to be placed into an asylum where she underwent an extreme course of therapy. She later depicted this in her painting, Down Below, probably created later in 1941, when she had been able to escape to New York. The painting shows the Santander mental asylum. The gates and buildings are in the background. Leonora is on the right, depicted in an elaborate dress, and accompanied by her prancing horse avatar. 4 figures, no doubt inmates of the asylum, are lounging on the ground. One has taken off her mask, only to reveal a further mask underneath. Another work from 1941 is Theatre People. In the safety of New York, she began making some drawings and etchings. Amongst these is Woman with Veil, which seems to be returning to her concerns about her upbringing. Here is an interior with a chair and 2 large overarching female figures. A young woman with a veil is running away from a demonic lion. Also among these is To Study the Numbers, made 9th June 1942, which was included in the Surrealist Portfolio VVV of 1943. The text states to study the numbers 7 and 9, then mirrored the legs of the sleeper. The image of the dog tied to a tree she reused in her painting Green Tea, also named La Dame Ovale, created in New York, July 1942. Carrington's book of 6 surrealist stories, La Dame Ovale, written back in 1938, had been illustrated by Ernst. In the painting, a female figure stands in a small grassy circle wrapped like a mummy. 3 other people, shrouded as mummies, are seen in the background beside the little fountain. On the lower right, a white horse calmly stands, while beside this is a red dog, more agitated and aggressive. They are restrained by leashes tied to trees that grow out of each other's backs. Thus they mutually restrain each other. The world is turned upside down, with birds and bats sharing the world underground with buried, shrouded corpses. It appears to be painted on top of an earlier work, some lines of which show through. A male figure can be seen sealed inside the cauldron, the lid of which has 4 stags. But this figure may be part of the earlier painted over work. Imagery of this painting is rather opaque, but some light can be thrown upon it by reading her short story, The Oval Lady. Its construction may reflect some personal concerns of Leonora Carrington, which are not accessible to the viewer. It seems to be based on a dream she had the night before she was given a powerful medication in Santander. She recounts the dream taking place in a park, somewhat like the Bois de Boulogne. 2 big horses were tied together. I was impatiently waiting for them to jump over that fence. After long hesitations, the horses jumped and galloped down the slope. Suddenly, a small white horse detached itself from them. The 2 big horses disappeared, and nothing was left on the road but the colt, who rolled all the way down and remained on his back, dying. I myself was the white colt. This painting has certainly attracted a number of wild interpretations, including one associating it with witchcraft. Late in 1942, Carrington left New York with her Mexican husband and settled in Mexico City.